She owns her space, and therefore her life. This simple reality holds profound power. A woman who lives alone without a boyfriend is not defined by absence, but by presence, her own. In solitude, her space becomes a reflection of her values, her choices, her energy. There is no compromise woven into the fabric of her environment. No diluted identity negotiating for space on the couch or silence in the morning. What exists is a room and atmosphere, a life built purely on what she accepts, allows, creates, and cultivates. This is not just independence. It is ownership of self in its rawest and most empowered form. In a world that conditions women to seek completion through relationship, to measure their worth through being wanted or chosen, the woman who lives alone carves a different path. She is not waiting to be claimed. She is not delaying her life until someone shows up to validate it. She is claiming it now through every choice she makes in her own space. The way she arranges her books, the scent she chooses to fill the room, the way she speaks out loud without shrinking her voice, these are not small things. These are statements. They say, "This is who I am when no one is watching." And that is enough, without the constant need to adjust to another person's preferences or moods. She learns to refine her intuition. She becomes deeply attuned to what brings her peace and what disturbs it, what energizes her and what drains her. In this way, her space becomes a feedback system for her spirit. Every wall and object mirrors a decision she made. Every corner holds her essence. And in this clarity, she develops something that many never truly access: inner authority. The quiet, resolute sense that she can trust herself, rely on herself, lead herself. There is something sacred about this kind of solitude. It is not lonely, it is alive. A woman alone is not a void waiting to be filled. She is a vessel being strengthened. In the stillness, she hears her own thoughts without distortion, but she makes decisions without second guessing for someone else's approval. She eats what nourishes her, moves how her body craves, and sleeps when her soul calls for rest. Her day is not filtered through anyone else's expectations. Her choices are not diluted by compromise. And in this autonomy, she begins to reclaim her time, her energy, her identity. This is not to say she closes herself off from love or companionship. On the contrary, she becomes so full, so rooted in self-awareness that when love enters, it will be an addition, not a rescue. She will not choose out of desperation or fear of being alone. She will choose from abundance, from discernment, and from the deep knowing that she can walk away from anything that asks her to shrink, bend, or betray her peace. A woman who owns her space is a woman who cannot be easily manipulated. She does not need you to complete her. She does not tolerate emotional games. She does not seek approval by molding herself into what others want her to be. She knows what it took to build her calm, and she will not trade it cheaply. Her solitude has taught her boundaries. Her independence has taught her discernment. Her silence has taught her power. She becomes magnetic not because she is trying to be, but because she is whole. There is a rare confidence in someone who doesn't flinch in their own company. She walks into rooms without needing attention, and therefore often commands it. She listens deeply because she does not fear her own voice. She speaks with precision because her thoughts are not blurred by external noise. And when she chooses to give her time, her energy, or her body, it is a conscious gift, not a reflex born of emptiness. Living alone without a boyfriend is often misunderstood as a temporary stage, a transitional moment, a sign of being unwanted. But in truth, it can be a season of profound transformation, a sacred chrysalis, a reclamation of selfhood that no relationship can ever provide if it hasn't first been built alone. When a woman truly owns her space, emotionally, physically, mentally, she becomes undeniable, and the world must meet her on her terms or not at all. This kind of woman does not chase, she aligns. She does not beg, she invites. She does not collapse, she stands. And in a culture that constantly tries to define her by who she's with, she writes a different narrative. One where being alone is not a wound, but a weapon. Not a lack, but a liberation. She is the author of her own life, page by page, in a space that echoes her truest name. And that is power. She chooses herself every day. That choice is not loud, not theatrical. It's quiet, consistent, and deeply intentional. It begins in the smallest moments, waking up without checking for a message from someone else, to define her morning, making her bed not for appearance, but as a promise to herself that she's worthy of order, comfort, and care. Choosing herself means moving through the world without seeking permission to exist, without asking for external validation to feel good in her skin. It's wearing what feels right, speaking what feels true, and doing what feeds her spirit, not because anyone is watching, but because she is. Each day, she decides, again and again, to meet her own needs before outsourcing her wholeness. She learns that no one is coming to save her, and that realization does not break her, it builds her. It clears the fog of fairy tales and replaces it with something far more real: self-respect. When she's hurt, she doesn't suppress it to avoid losing someone. When she's joyful, she doesn't shrink it to make others more comfortable. When she's unsure, she doesn't abandon herself in the hope someone else will lead. She becomes the steady hand on her own back. Choosing herself means saying no when something doesn't align. It means walking away from conversations, situations, or people that make her question her value. And it means doing it without guilt. The woman who chooses herself learns that self-betrayal is the deepest wound, and she no longer allows it, even in the name of love, comfort, or attachment. She sees clearly that if love requires her to abandon herself, it is not love, it is dependency dressed as affection. Over time, this daily devotion to herself begins to rewire everything. Her self-talk becomes kinder, more powerful. Her standards rise, not out of bitterness, but because she finally understands what it feels like to be met by herself fully. She stops chasing and starts attracting. The more she commits to herself, the less interested she becomes in shallow validation or temporary comfort. She becomes magnetic, not by performing, but by being deeply grounded in her own essence. She knows her time, her presence, her peace. These are sacred things, not given lightly, not handed over in the hope someone else will give them meaning. From this devotion to self, a new strength is born. Her emotional balance sharpens. Her ability to discern what aligns and what doesn't becomes clearer. She becomes less reactive and more intentional, less scattered and more centered. Her sense of identity is no longer tangled in the eyes of others. She no longer needs someone to tell her who she is. She already knows. And so she lives not to impress, but to express, not to be chosen, but to continue choosing herself day after day without apology. In that space of sovereignty, she preserves her energy. When a woman lives without a boyfriend and without the constant emotional negotiations that often come with a relationship, her energy stops leaking. She stops bleeding out in the form of over-giving, over-explaining, or emotionally rescuing others. She is no longer tangled in cycles of proving, performing, or persuading. Her emotional power no longer exists in reaction to others. It becomes something she cultivates and keeps. This preservation is not isolation, it is clarity. She learns how much of her time was once consumed trying to decode mixed signals, overthink texts, heal others, or tolerate behaviors that chipped away at her spirit. Now she uses that time differently. She invests it in her health, her passions, her rest. She waters her own garden instead of begging someone else for rain. And the result is radical. Her mind clears, her body heals, her vision expands. She has energy, not because life is easier, but because she is no longer exhausted by people who don't match her value. And in this state of preservation, she begins to build. She writes, she creates, she learns, she dreams. She is no longer constantly distracted by the drama of the temporary. Her nervous system calms. Her mornings are hers. Her evenings are peaceful. Her goals, once interrupted by emotional chaos, begin to take form. She becomes sharper, more focused, more rooted. Not because she is avoiding love, but because she has stopped bleeding for things that aren't love. What emerges from this lifestyle is not just peace. It is power. Not power over others, but power with herself. She no longer fears being alone because she sees what she is capable of when she is with herself. She no longer needs someone else to validate her softness, her brilliance, her beauty. She has met herself in the deepest silence, in the toughest days, in the purest joy, and she has stood tall. She has faced her reflection without distortion. And now, no one can convince her to forget what she has seen. To choose herself and preserve her energy is not a rejection of intimacy, it is preparation for the real thing. She is no longer seduced by sparks that burn out or attention that fades. She is looking for resonance, for depth, for alignment, and if it does not come, she is not empty, she is full, not waiting, walking, not incomplete, unshakably whole. She builds unshakable inner silence in a world that constantly demands reaction, noise, and validation. Her ability to sit in stillness becomes a quiet revolution. She no longer fears the absence of sound or the absence of someone next to her. Instead, she listens deeply to herself without interruption, without distraction. Her solitude is not a punishment, but a place of restoration. Here, she meets her own thoughts without filters. She watches the rise and fall of emotions without clinging to them. The silence no longer threatens her. It strengthens her, because in that stillness, she finds something most people never touch: clarity. Inner silence isn't just the absence of words or chaos. It's the absence of inner war. The woman who lives alone learns how to dissolve conflict within herself. She stops waging battles over what she should be, what she could have done, or what others think of her. The silence teaches her that peace is not external. It's a decision she must make over and over again. No boyfriend, no relationship, no outside voice can give it to her. And once she finds it inside herself, she defends it fiercely. Not with walls, but with wisdom. She knows the cost of her peace, and she is no longer willing to pay it for attention, temporary comfort, or shallow connection. From this inner stillness, she moves differently. She doesn't chase. She doesn't over-explain. She doesn't need to perform. Her energy is calm, focused, rooted. She listens more than she speaks, not out of insecurity, but out of power. Her words are deliberate, not because she lacks emotion, but because she has learned the strength of restraint. This silence becomes her discipline. In it, she learns when to engage and when to let go, when to speak and when to allow space. She no longer reacts to life in survival mode. She responds from stillness, with wisdom that only grows when you're no longer afraid to be alone with yourself. She becomes the source, not the seeker. In relationships, in society, In the stories women are told from a young age, there is often an unspoken message: wait to be chosen, wait to be seen, wait to be loved. But the woman who lives alone learns to reverse that script. She stops looking outward to be affirmed. She no longer waits, she initiates. She creates her own comfort, her own joy, her own validation. She becomes the source of her own love. And in doing so, she becomes untouchable. Not because she's cold, but because she's whole. When a woman becomes the source, she no longer asks others to complete her. She doesn't beg to be noticed, doesn't shift to be accepted. She shows up as she is, fully expressed, fully grounded. If someone sees her, good. If not, she doesn't collapse. She knows her worth does not shrink in someone else's blindness. Because her value does not depend on being seen, it depends on being real. She has nothing to prove, only truth to live, and that truth radiates from her. Not because she's trying to impress anyone, but because she's aligned with herself. This self-sourced power is magnetic. It doesn't demand attention. It commands it naturally. People notice not because she tries to stand out, but because she's not trying at all. Her presence feels different, still, deep, intentional. She walks into a room, not seeking something, but bringing something. Not asking for approval, but offering clarity. And in that presence, there is no hunger, only fulfillment. People feel it. They may not understand it, but they recognize it. The energy of a woman who is not chasing anything she hasn't already given herself. She is whole, not waiting. The world often tells women that life begins when they find a partner, as if singlehood is a pause, a prelude, an incomplete chapter. But the woman who lives alone knows otherwise. She understands that her life is not on hold. It is happening fully, richly, and powerfully right now. She does not wait to be loved to feel lovable. She does not wait to be desired to dress beautifully. She does not wait to be chosen to celebrate who she is. Her life is not a placeholder. It is the masterpiece. She travels alone, rests alone, works, grows, transforms alone, and in doing so, she reclaims the narrative that a woman's worth is tied to her relationship status. She shows that fulfillment is not reserved for the partnered. Joy is not exclusive to the coupled. Power does not require a witness. She is not half of anything. She is complete, not despite her solitude, but because of it. This wholeness changes how she loves. If and when she invites someone into her life, it is not out of emptiness, but abundance. She does not need saving. She does not need fixing. She does not need to be rescued from her aloneness. In fact, she protects it because she knows that anyone worth sharing her world must enhance her peace, not disturb it, must deepen her life, not distract her from it. She no longer fears being alone. She fears losing herself, and she will never trade the home she's built within for a love that asks her to abandon it. In all of this, her silence, her self-sourcing, her wholeness, she becomes not just a woman who lives alone. She becomes a force, a standard, a living example that the power she was taught to search for in others has always lived within her. And now, finally, she answers to it. She does not chase, she aligns. This shift in energy is everything. When a woman stops running after people, attention, or love, she steps out of desperation and into dignity. Chasing requires her to leave herself behind, to stretch, bend, and contort in the hope of being enough for someone else. Alignment, on the other hand, requires presence. It calls her to stand exactly as she is and let what belongs to her recognize her without force. She no longer seeks to convince, to impress, or to be chosen. She simply becomes fully, truthfully, powerfully, and trusts that what resonates with her truth will naturally find her. This is not passivity, it is power rooted in self-respect. She realizes that anything she has to chase is not aligned. Love that is meant for her won't play hide and seek. People who respect her won't confuse her. Opportunities that are right for her won't require her to shrink. So she lets go of forcing and begins to flow. This doesn't mean she avoids effort. It means her effort is now directed inward, toward her own evolution, not external validation. And in this, she becomes magnetic, because nothing is more attractive than someone who needs nothing from you, but brings everything within themselves. She does not beg, she invites. When a woman lives alone, she learns that begging, whether for time, respect, affection, or honesty, is a form of self-abandonment. She knows now that anything given only after pleading is not a gift, but a compromise of dignity. So she stops asking twice, she stops convincing others of her worth. She does not chase apologies that won't come or love that won't show up. She becomes clear about what she offers and what she desires in return. And instead of begging for scraps, she sets a table and invites only those who come in peace, with full hands and open hearts. To invite rather than beg is an act of self-possession. She knows that her life, her space, her energy are sacred. Not everyone gets access. Not everyone deserves a seat at her table. And just because someone knocks doesn't mean they belong. She learns discernment, who to let in, who to keep out, and most importantly, how to say no without guilt. Her solitude has taught her that being alone is far better than being surrounded by people who make her feel unseen. So she protects her peace with the same grace and firmness she once used to please others. She does not collapse, she stands. Life will test her. Loneliness will come like waves. Doubt will whisper. Old habits will try to resurface. But she no longer folds under pressure. She does not collapse into relationships just to feel held. She does not lower her standards to avoid solitude. She stands, especially when it's hard, because she remembers how far she's come. She remembers what it took to build herself, and she will not tear it down just to feel temporarily wanted. She has learned that falling into someone who doesn't know how to catch her is a form of self-harm. So now, she holds herself, she trusts herself, she returns to herself. Standing doesn't mean she doesn't feel. It means she has learned how to hold her emotions without letting them hold her hostage. She can cry and still be powerful. She can feel afraid and still move forward. She can be heartbroken and still not chase what broke her. Her strength is not in her ability to avoid pain. It is in her refusal to lose herself in it. She has become her own ground, her own shelter, her own steady. And in a world that constantly tells women to lean on others, she has discovered the life-changing truth. She can lean on herself. She is not waiting. She is walking. The biggest lie women are told is that their real life starts when someone else enters it. That love will complete them, that partnership will give them purpose, that being chosen is the prize. But she has chosen a different path. She is not waiting for anyone to show up before she begins. She is not pressing pause on her dreams, her travels, her joy, or her becoming. She is walking every day into her future, with or without companionship. Her life is not a draft, it is the real thing. She is not a placeholder. She is the point. She books the trips. She buys the flowers. She celebrates the small wins. She lives now fully and unapologetically. She no longer lives in someday. She lives in today. And the more she honors her own timeline, the less affected she is by society's expectations. Marriage is not the destination. Partnership is not the goal. Love is welcome, but not needed to validate her existence. She has already arrived within herself, and if love finds her along the way, it will be a beautiful bonus, not a rescue mission. In all of this, her alignment, her boundaries, her resilience, her forward movement, she redefines what it means to be a woman alone. She is not lacking. She is leading. She is not empty. She is full. She is not waiting. She is already becoming, not dependent, not desperate, not defined by another, but deeply rooted in herself and rising.